Why do you think God waited for such a long time, like from the Old Testament right up to the New Testament, to send the Messiah?
That's a really cool question because the promise of the Messiah goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15.
Okay.
Right when Adam and Eve sinned, and the serpent was, the sole responsibility for that.
Right.
God speaks to the serpent for the first time a prophecy, saying that, I will put enmity between you, your offspring, and the woman, the offspring of the woman, between your seed and her seed, and he shall crush your head, but you shall bruise his heel.
Right.
So the promise of someone to come began all the way from Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. The reason why this question is interesting is because Adam and Eve, if you notice in chapter 4, the beginning of chapter 4, the first thing Eve says, once Cain is born, is,
Right.
with the help of the Lord, I have given birth to a man, or I have
Right.
given birth to a son, right?
Right.
And there's an expectation there that this is going to be the person who crushes the serpent's head.
Right.
But how wrong she was, right? Cain
Right.
ended up being the first murderer.
Yeah, and
You know.
Abel was
Yeah.
the first victim. Yeah.
The first victim, exactly. And that itself set the precedent for, the battle between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman,
Right.
between children of darkness and children of light.
Right.
And that had to play out. The coming of the Messiah would be a sacrifice.
Right.
And a sacrifice comes at a cost.
Right.
Right? And to understand what the cost is, that's where you have the interplay between children of darkness and the children of light.
Right.
This is actually the theme of the entire Psalms, right? The predominant theme of the entire Psalms is God save me from the wicked man.
Right.
It's the righteous person in trouble calling out to the Lord. And that actually shows you what the righteous person does. He doesn't retaliate, but he looks to the Lord.
Right.
And it goes without saying that he suffers in the process.
Right.
And that is what Jesus actually mentions when he's walking on the road to Emmaus.
Right.
And he's talking with his two disciples saying, did you not know that everything written in the law and the prophets and the Psalms had to be fulfilled?
Right.
So everything that happened in the life of Jesus was a culmination of, what the righteous person goes through.
Right.
And once again, it comes at a cost, and that's why he had to give his life.
Right.
The way he crushes the serpent's head is through his own death, right? And so, to allow this to play out, the life of Jesus would be the summary of the lives of every single righteous person lived on earth.
Right.
So everyone from then and even after that, even after Christ, we who live in the age of the church, right? We go through the same thing, like Paul says, right? Like, I want to know Christ, the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings,
Right.
becoming like him in his death, right? I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in me, right? Galatians 2:20. So everyone before Christ and even everyone after Christ who follow after righteousness,
Right.
we go through the same pattern of suffering, the same pattern of refinement, and the same pattern of being tested and tried by God.
Right.
And Jesus is the captain and the head of all of this.
Right.
And which is why, we are able to look to him, as our, like First Peter says, right? In your suffering, Christ has left a pattern for you to follow so that you may follow in his footsteps. So God is someone who actually does things slow.
Right.
He allows things to play out because only then he can give the verdict in the end.
Right.
And so that's really, it's the waiting also really makes us observe and really makes us know what to expect and value what, we've been waiting for when it comes.
Yes.
So you see Simeon and Anna, right, during the time of Jesus' birth.
Right.
Both of these people were old and they were waiting for God's promise. And when he finally arrives, they're able to immediately recognize it. And what do they do about it? They stewarded it so well.
Right.
Simeon, sang a song as a prayer, and says, now, my eyes have seen your salvation and your servant can now depart in peace.
Yes.
And Anna, as soon as she sees, the baby Jesus, she goes around telling all Israel, the hope of Israel is finally here. So
Yeah.
both of these old people, and of course Mary and Joseph, they've been able to appreciate and value what was given when it came. So that is one thing about God, where He does make us wait, not as a punishment,
Right.
but as being a participant in the process, and also valuing what He gives.
Right.